Today we are presenting what is a behind the scenes look at the chip race strategy section. Dara is the head honcho at Simplify Poker, which is not a million miles away from the chip race because it's just basically swap me for David, and that's what you've got. And what we're doing from now on is we're sponsoring the strategy section. And for those of you who've watched the strategy section or listened to it before, Dara goes away and does the solve, which he then relays to the celebrity guest that's on the podcast. We thought it'd be interesting just to give you a behind the scenes look at what happens with that. So we're going to do the solve now, which will later be on the chip race section, though you will be seeing the chip race section first. I think I've explained that fully. So, Dara, what's the hand? Because I'm completely blind in this one. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, okay, so this is a hand I played against. I was going to call him one of the rising stars of Irish poker, but maybe he's already a star. Thomas Murphy, who
Hmm.
I was on the scene a couple of years ago at a deep run in the Irish Open. He's been on the chip race already. I lovingly refer to him as the boy wonder. He final
Yeah.
tabled a WSOP event.
Really good Twitch guy as well. Destined to be quite a big name in Twitch, we think.
Yeah, I think he's going to be massive on Twitch. Brass Monkey. That's BRASSMONKIE. If you are looking for somebody new to watch in Twitch. So this is a hand I played against him late on day one of the IPO here in Ireland
Right.
a couple of months ago. Um, and the field had whittled down fairly much. We were approaching the end of the day, which was also going to be very near the money. Uh,
Mhm.
so I would say roughly 18-20% of the field left, something like that, with 15%
Sure.
paid. Um, it falls to me in the hijack. I have pocket eights, so obviously the easiest open ever.
Yep.
So I open and it folds to Tomo in the big blind, and he elects to call.
So it's 25 bigs effective, but what did Tomo have you covered, or did you have him
Tomo had
covered?
me slightly covered. Yeah,
Okay, so 25 bigs effective is pretty fair then.
yeah. Tomo had 30 big blinds. We'll start by looking at the Chippy V sim,
Yeah.
and then we'll see how the ICM affects it. So Tomo calls. Um, the flop comes ace, ace of diamonds, 10 of hearts, 6 of hearts. I have black eights, incidentally.
Right. Yeah.
Tomo checks, as you'd expect. It's a range check,
Yeah.
and it's pretty much a range bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's what I went for. I went for 33%. Um, that seemed about the size to me based on just how many draws there are on the board, the fact that it's ace high. Um,
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to go for the really small bet, and the ICM pressure is probably no, I guess the ICM pressure would probably make it smaller, I guess. But yeah, I understand.
yeah. Tomo called.
Hmm.
So now I think, well, he's not calling with nothing. He does have a reasonable amount of aces. He also has a reasonable amount of tens, obviously.
Hmm.
So the turn was an offsuit king, and he checks again.
So before we look at the thing, I mean, this seems like a good barrel card for you, even though you're probably turning your hand into a bluff at this point.
Hmm. So when he checks, you are correct. It is a good
Yeah.
barrel. We have a few hands to slow down, but this is a reasonable one. I guess the main purpose of the barrel is to try and fold a 10 now,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
which is why we don't tend to bet when we have a 10 ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, in practice, I decided not to bet um,
Okay.
because I just had a sense Tomo was interested in the hand, and that he wasn't necessarily going to fold to a barrel.
Mhm.
I figured with eights, I had some showdown as well. I mean, I'm still beating stuff like lower pairs and the
Hard,
six.
hard
Um,
draws as well. Yeah.
yeah, there is a small amount of checking uh, with eights, but obviously, as you identified, we mostly bet. But I did check in practice,
Mhm.
and then the river was an offsuit jack. So now
Okay.
any queen makes a straight.
Hmm.
He checks, and um, I am supposed to bluff now. Uh,
Right.
there's no checking with my hand. This is a small frequency because we're supposed to mostly have bet the turn. But again, I just had a sense he wasn't folding.
Yeah.
Um, so I decided to give up. It was near enough the end of the day. I've only put a couple of big blinds in. I still have a reasonable stack. So I was pretty sure I'm supposed to bet in practice. Oh, sorry. I
Yeah.
was pretty sure I was supposed to bet in theory, because I am fairly near the bottom of my range now. But I decided to check. Tomo had Jack six off. So
Right. Okay.
if we,
That makes sense in hindsight. Yeah.
yeah, if
It,
we review the hand from his perspective, on the flop when I bet, um, Jack six is not actually. I think he had a heart. Let me see. Let me check my notes. Yeah, he needs to have the Jack of Hearts to continue.
Mhm.
Now he didn't actually have the Jack of Hearts as it happens.
Yeah.
So he was continuing a bit wide. Um, but he covers me, so it'll be interesting to look at this in ICM if this is different.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of, I mean, it makes sense to me as a chip EV defend, but not an ICM defend. But it's not even a chip EV defend. It's a bluff if when there's a heart, which makes sense. It's a good bluff candidate because you can get really lucky with it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
Um,
and you'll also see that the Jack six off isn't there all the time. That's because it's supposed to be folded some of the time pre-flop. It's
yeah,
not it's
yeah.
not an auto defend even for
Hmm.
chips. So that's
I
another
mean,
interesting.
I'm curious. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do this with the ICM, but I'm curious if Jack six off is a defend in ICM world because
I'm 100% certain it isn't.
yeah, right.
Because what happens in ICM, he covers me, yes, but his hands are still going to underrealize. So typically, I'm pretty sure when we look at the ranges, what's going to disappear from the range is all the worst offsuit stuff. And
Hmm.
obviously, Jack six off is rock bottom. I wouldn't be surprised if Jack eight off is the bottom with ICM.
Yeah,
Jack seven off might not even be a defend. But yeah. So with that in mind, now let's look at what he should do on the turn. On the turn, he obviously has a range check, and then on the river, he's supposed to actually lead with his Jack six. He's
yeah, yeah.
put the blocker bet because I will check back a lot, obviously.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me because Jack six blocks crucially like Queen Jack, um, and like Ace Jack, Jack
And
10.
once I check the turn, I have a lot of hands that just have showdown,
Hmm.
but are not going to bet themselves now, and the board gets even scarier. So the small bet makes sense. Okay, now let's try and find an ICM sim that's roughly similar. So if we go into ICM, I think it was roughly 18% left.
Mm.
Uh, I have 25 big blinds, so let's find one where this is probably the nearest we're going to get.
Yeah, I'd say so. That looks pretty fair.
24. We'll show you how to change this because this is part of the purpose of the video too, to show you how to run these sims yourself.
Mhm.
So obviously, when it comes to me in the hijack, I have a very clear open still, but you can see
Yep,
I'm a good bit tighter
yep.
for chips. Um, I'm not supposed to be opening fours or even fives all the time anymore. Um, but obviously, eights is still an open. You can see, wow, even Jack eight off isn't a defend. Uh,
Mm.
Jack nine off isn't an auto defend. He really has
Yeah.
to tighten up here because the stacks are quite close together. If we look at the risk premiums, Um, my risk premium against him is 11.1 percent, and his risk premium against me is 9.2. So
Mm.
those
Yeah,
types of
much.
hands just really under realized, and that's the first important takeaway here. You just have to
Do
be
you think?
far tighter.
Do you think this is partially because of the fact that day one doesn't end in the money, so people have this kind of false sense of ICM safety, I guess? Because I've made the money in the IPO main event. Day two starts pretty much on the bubble,
Yeah.
but people, I think, because people think they've got a sleep between the two things, that ICM's not applicable until the morning.
I think a lot of people think like that. I don't think Tom necessarily thinks like that.
No.
Tom is a professional, but I do think professionals also have a sort of a associated mindset where they think, well, even if I bust before the end, I can re-enter again because this was one of the
Yes, yes,
fights.
that's probably a better reasoning
And,
for this. Yeah.
and that's actually legitimate because if you have an edge on every bullet, then you can take slightly minus EV spots towards the end of the day, knowing that if you do bust, you're gonna realize the equity of the edge on your next bullet.
Yep.
So that's certainly reasonable. But Jack six off is just way too far away from the calling range. You can see he is supposed to fall 47, almost 47% compared to only 25% for chips.
Hmm.
So quite a significant difference already. Now we're going to run the actual solve. So in practice,
We're going to have to add his hand as well, right, to the range.
oh, that's well, yeah. I'm going to try and do it without it first, just because we can look at what similar hands are doing.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Actually, no, you're
Yeah.
right. Probably no, you're right. We probably should add his hands to the range. So I he's going to have 28 big blinds behind. I'm going to have 23, and now we have to change his range. So we're
I
going to
guess
have
we've
to
just got
add a
to
lot of hands to his
we've just
range.
got to add all the Broadway low card stuff basically
Yeah,
in the offsuit portion.
yeah, he's probably defending all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he's probably defending the same offsuit hands that he's going to defend suited, bar in the really, really low stuff. Like
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, this is probably what his range actually looks like.
when you do the segment with Tomo, make sure you plug the tournament post flop ICM simplified course to him.
Don't worry, I will. Um, yeah, Tomo admits himself that ICM is still his biggest weakness, and that's not unusual for players who are relatively new.
No.
It does kind of take years. Okay, so now let's look at the solution. So the flop was ace 10 6. He still has a range check. I have a range bet. 40%. I actually use 33%, but there's not going to be much difference. But just to keep it consistent, let's make it 33%, since that's the size I used. And you can see some very occasionally when he has the Jack of Hearts, he can turn his hand into a bluff, but he should never call. His hand is under realizing, even with this wider range that he's not supposed to have.
Yeah.
He's pretty much supposed to just fold his hand.
Yeah,
Um,
because the ace 10 hits you so heavily um, that it's reverse implied odds, right? It's which is why turning the hand into a bluff makes the most sense because you can dog him in some create. He can dog you in some creative ways, but other than that, I mean, like even the
yeah,
bottom,
the
even
hand
your
makes yeah the hand makes no sense as a call because
yeah.
he's just in very bad shape against my
I,
back.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that your bluffs beat some of beat this hand. Some of your
Yeah,
bluffs beat this hand.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like even pocket eights, which is kind of a bluff on this board,
yeah,
is still beating him. But if I do have one of those hands, I'm not going to raise, and he can get there, which I
yeah,
think is the point you were making. And but there's no point in calling because he's not going to win unimproved. So, but there's another important point here, which is that if you look at the difference between the two solutions, um, with Jack six off, he always continues with the Jack of Hearts for chips, but he only
Mm,
rarely continues. And this is one of the big reasons why you just fold these hands pre-flop. Even when you
mm,
flop a backdoor, a double backdoor actually in this case, because you obviously have king queen for the straight as well. Even with a double backdoor, it's not a great continue. So therefore, it's just not a great defend.
yeah,
Um,
because if you actually get if you actually make a flush with this hand, um, getting the stacks in and you being behind is a much bigger disaster. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
And so there's just a whole range of flops like this one where you have this kind of like pair and backdoors where you can continue for chip EV, but you can't continue because of ICM.
mm,
And when you factor in all, it's not just this flop. There's a myriad of other flops that are similar. So therefore, you are going to have to just fold your hand on the flop, and therefore you should just fold it pre-flop because it's not going
mm.
to hit the flop strong enough, often enough, for chip EV. But anyway, he does call. The turn we said was an offsuit king. Now he obviously is supposed to check. Pocket eights
Checks
is
back,
again
checks back a
is
little bit more than you did.
yeah, pocket eights again he's supposed to bluff, and I was pretty I kind of recognized that in game, but again just had a sense he was not going to fold.
Hmm.
Um, the king, you get that kind of like he looks at the king and he's not completely disinterested,
Mm,
which
yeah.
makes sense in retrospect because he's obviously picked up a gut shot.
Yeah,
Um,
and you obviously know. Not only do you know his game, but you know his mentality a little bit more than the average player because you've just talked a lot of strategy with him.
yeah,
Just like I dare say that if it was against me, you'd be saying, "Oh, Barry's going to do something stupid right now to show off." So,
yeah, absolutely. I didn't think. First of all, I thought Tom was capable of check raising me as a bluff. I also thought he tends to just continue a bit too wide in these spots, which I think is borne out by this hand already. So therefore, I felt check was the best in practice. Um, and then the river was the queen.
mhm.
Now he doesn't have Jack six in his range here,
Yeah,
but he does have some 6x, and that's all supposed to actually barrel now.
yeah,
Like even 6 5 and 6 4 are supposed
yeah,
to bet. So I think in practice he's definitely supposed to bet Jack six off. But he does,
yeah, yeah, because he's got the straight blocker as well, and the he's
yeah,
got a quite significant pair blocker.
yeah. And obviously I'm near the bottom of my range, so I'm supposed to bet as well. But again, in practice, I just felt he's got something. Sorry, the river wasn't a queen. The river was a jack. Okay, we're just gonna have to rewind this bit. So the river was actually a jack, making him two pair.
Oh,
So
yeah. So 10-6 is the equivalent hand because that's also two pair, but trashy.
yeah,
Um, which
yeah,
leaves.
like I guess Jack 10 is kind of equivalent to yeah. So again, he should really lead with his two pairs. Um, he does check, and then I'm obviously at bottom of range. So I'm
Just for completeness, I know what the outcome's going to be, but just have the big blind bet there because I presume pocket eights is like a fold and not turned into a bluff. Oh,
uh
turned into a bluff sometimes. Yeah, okay.
mixed, yeah. Like when you look at our range, like really eights is down towards the bottom, and that's kind of the
Mhm.
crucial part.
Yeah.
Mm, So I mean, do we have any worse hand, in fact? Fives and sevens. Yeah, all the low pairs. If we don't have a low pair, we have something. Um,
Hmm.
that's kind of coming out of our turn check because we would keep barreling with a lot of our bluffs on the turn. So yeah, being a rock bottom of range. Um, but again, this is one of those spots where I just kind of felt, well, he's not folding, so I'm not going to waste the chips with a bet.
Yeah. As is often the case in these situations, the key lesson here is just tighten up pre-flop, especially when ICM is a factor. You avoid a lot of chip bleeding situations like this. Although
Yeah,
it
the
always
two
happens.
things kind of go hand in hand because you have to play more passively and do more folding post flop. You have to tighten up pre-flop, the hands that don't hit the flop hard enough to be able to continue in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference between ICM affected situations and chip EV. Um, and this is already a fairly significant ICM situation for both of us. Bubble
Hmm.
is looming. We both have risk premiums of in or around 10%. And incidentally, if had I decided to bet the river as a bluff, um, and this is the size it's usually used, 61%. Um, well, he has no equivalent hand, I guess. Uh, yeah, yeah, he's never going to fold two pair. Um,
Mm.
uh, yeah, two pair are not going to fold. Ace Jack is kind of equivalent. Um, so yeah, I mean, this is one of the spots where it's important to pay attention to your opponent as well and allow their behavior to override what you think is correct. On the turn, I thought I'm probably supposed to barrel, but I had a sense he was interested. And
Hmm.
on the river, I was like, yeah, he's not folding now. Um, so so
Yeah,
I'm not.
it's hard. It's hard to obviously like we can rigidly solve a hand. You can never solve for just a gut feeling. But I think when somebody as experienced as yourself has a gut feeling, it's usually based on actual tangible things, but you've just not been able to articulate them to yourself yet. So it's
Yeah, the way I
it's
usually get the way I usually the way it usually appears to me is essentially it's almost like a vibe check rather than anything else. Uh, Sometimes you just have the sense that somebody is interested in the hand and therefore less likely to fold.
mm,
And in those spots, obviously, I bluff less and I value bet more when I have very strong hands. And then similarly, sometimes when somebody bets themselves, you have the sense that they're very comfortable. And then other times you have the sense that they're uncomfortable. Um, and you assign different meanings to that based on the player in question. So it's not like there was any specific tell. I mean, I guess I saw his eyes just look at the board more intently. If
yeah.
if I had to put anything on, and I guess his posture also suggested interest. He was probably more upright than relaxed. So
Hmm.
that's probably what it was. But but in game, it just felt like yeah, he's interested in the hand, and I don't think he's folding.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good first hand for this new segment that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we get to plug post-flop ICM and we also get to plug beyond GTO because I made some exploitative divergences here.
Yeah, yeah, and make sure you plug them directly to Thomas because I think that's the guaranteed lead.
Yeah, cool. For more free content like this, including some free courses, free videos, and a free ebook on how to study, go to simplifypoker.com/free.